A rainy night. A desperate child. A cold, calculating billionaire. What was about to happen in that Beverly Hills mansion would change 2 lives forever. When little Emily knocked on that mahogany door, she didn't know she was about to reveal a secret that would destroy everything that man believed he knew. Her mother was dying. Time was running out. And the truth? The truth was far darker than anyone could imagine. The rain fell torrentially over Beverly Hills that October night in 2023. Heavy drops beat against the windows of the luxurious mansions that rose majestically along Mulholland Drive, where only California's most privileged had the right to dwell. Wrought iron gates protected properties valued at tens of millions of dollars, perfectly manicured gardens, infinity pools, and lives that seemed to have been blessed by fortune itself. Inside mansion number 1847, a contemporary-style property with glass walls and exposed concrete valued at $45 million, was Marcus Whitmore. At 42 years old, he was one of the richest and most respected men on the West Coast. CEO of Whitmore Industries, a giant in the technology and investment sector, Marcus had built an empire from scratch. His story was told in business magazines, his speeches filled auditoriums, and his name was synonymous with relentless success. But that night, Marcus was alone. As always, he remained in his office on the 2nd floor, surrounded by computer screens displaying Asian market charts, a glass of 50-year-old Scotch whiskey beside him, and an empty expression on his face. His piercing blue eyes, which had intimidated hundreds of executives in boardrooms, now stared at nothing. His dark hair was perfectly slicked back, his Armani suit impeccable even at 11 at night. Marcus Whitmore was admired by millions but loved by no one. He had no family. He had no true friends. He had no one to call on a night like that. His marriage had ended 6 years earlier, when his ex-wife Catherine left, taking with her the only spark of humanity that remained in him. "You love your money more than you love any human being," were her last words before disappearing from his life forever. And she was right. Marcus had learned early on that trusting people was a mistake. Orphaned since the age of 8, raised in foster homes where he was just another number, another mouth to feed, he had been molded by rejection and loneliness. When he finally left the system at 18, he made a promise to himself. He would never be vulnerable again. He would never depend on anyone. He would never care enough for someone to be able to hurt him. And it worked. He built a fortress around himself, made of money, power, and indifference. People respected him out of fear, not love. And Marcus preferred it that way. The rain intensified, transforming into a violent storm. Thunder echoed through the empty mansion, but Marcus barely noticed. He was used to the silence. He was used to the loneliness. He was used to the emptiness that filled every corner of that gigantic house that looked more like a luxury mausoleum than a home. That's when he heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Someone was knocking on the front door. Marcus frowned, looking at the Patek Philippe watch on his wrist. 11:15 at night. Who could be knocking on his door at this hour, on a stormy night? His security system was one of the most advanced in the world. No one could get past the gates without authorization. No one should be there. He ignored it. It was probably some malfunction in the intercom system. Knock, knock, knock. Louder this time. More insistent. More desperate. With an irritated sigh, Marcus left his glass of whiskey on the desk and descended the Italian marble staircase leading to the entrance hall. His footsteps echoed through the empty house. Through the security cameras installed at the entrance, he could see who was on the other side before opening. But what he saw made him stop halfway. It was a child. A small girl, soaked to the bone, shivering with cold under the relentless rain. She couldn't be more than 7 or 8 years old. Her dark brown hair was plastered to her pale face, her huge, frightened eyes fixed on the camera, as if she knew someone was watching. She wore a faded, torn pink dress, dirty sneakers without socks, and hugged herself desperately trying to get warm. Knock. 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 She knocked again, her small, trembling hands against the massive door. Marcus was paralyzed. His first instinct was to call private security and let them deal with it. It was probably some scam, some elaborate attempt at invasion or extortion. He had read about cases like this. People using children to get into the properties of the wealthy. But something in those eyes, something in that child's desperate expression stopped him from turning away. Against all his instincts, Marcus deactivated the alarm and opened the door. The girl lifted her face to him, and Marcus could see the tears mixed with rain on her face. She was trembling violently, her lips almost blue from the cold. But what shocked him were her eyes. Deep brown eyes, filled with a sadness no child should carry. Please. Her voice came out weak, breaking. Please, sir. I need help. It's my mother. She's dying. The girl extended a trembling hand, and Marcus saw she was holding something. A crumpled piece of paper, soaked, almost falling apart. She sent me here, gave me this address, said you're the only person who can help her. Please. The girl began to sob. She doesn't have much time. Please, Mr. Whitmore, my mother is dying. Marcus felt his blood run cold. How did that child know his name? Marcus stood there frozen in the doorway while the rain continued to punish the girl. His rational brain screamed at him to close the door, call the police, let the authorities deal with it. But something deeper, something he had buried decades ago, prevented him from moving. Come in, he finally said, his voice coming out harsher than he intended. The girl hesitated for a moment, as if she couldn't believe he had actually said that. Then, trembling uncontrollably, she crossed through the door and entered the immense hall of the mansion. Her soaked sneakers left wet footprints on the polished marble floor. She looked around with wide eyes, clearly intimidated by the opulence surrounding her, but there was something more urgent in her expression than admiration. Wait here, Marcus ordered, disappearing down a hallway. He returned moments later with a large, soft towel. Without saying anything, he wrapped the girl in it, drying her face and hair with mechanical, almost uncomfortable movements. He wasn't used to dealing with children. He wasn't used to dealing with anyone in a gentle way. What's your name? He asked, his voice still cold and distant. Emily, she answered, her teeth chattering. Emily Rose Parker. Emily, Marcus repeated. You said your mother is dying. Where is she? Tears began running down the girl's face again. At home, in our apartment. She has cancer. Pancreatic cancer. The doctors said there's nothing more they can do. She doesn't have enough health insurance for the experimental treatment. We don't have money. Emily sobbed. She's getting worse and worse. Today she could barely breathe, and then she gave me this address. Emily extended the soaked paper again. Marcus took it carefully, unfolding it slowly. The ink was smeared from the rain, but he could read what was written in a shaky, desperate handwriting. 1847 Mulholland Drive. Marcus Whitmore. Please help my daughter. Sarah. Marcus felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. Sarah. That name echoed in his mind like a ghost from the past he had desperately tried to forget. It couldn't be. Not after so many years. Not after everything. "What's your mother's full name?" he asked, his voice coming out lower, more tense. "Sarah." "Sarah Elizabeth Parker," Emily answered, wiping tears with the palm of her hand. "She works as a nurse, or used to, until she got too sick to continue." Marcus had to lean against the wall. Sarah Parker. No, it couldn't be the same Sarah. The Sarah he had known 20 years ago, when he was still a young college student struggling to pay his bills, working 3 jobs while studying business administration at UCLA. The Sarah who had been the only person who had made him believe that maybe, just maybe, he could trust someone again. "Where do you live?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "In East Los Angeles, in the Boyle Heights neighborhood, apartment 3B on Evergreen Avenue," Emily said. "It's far. I had to take 3 buses to get here. It took almost 3 hours, and I didn't have money for the whole fare, so I had to jump the turnstile once, and then it started raining and—" She started crying again. "My mother doesn't know I came. She was sleeping because of the pain medication. But I heard her saying your name. She was looking at an old photo and saying your name, and then I found this paper in her drawer." Marcus felt his throat tighten. An old photo. Sarah had kept a photo of him after all these years? After the way he had treated her? After simply disappearing from her life without explanation when his company started to take off and he decided that relationships were a distraction? "How long has your mother been sick?" he asked. 8 months, Emily answered, her voice small and frightened. "She found out right after my 7th birthday, in February. At first the doctors said there was a chance that if she did chemotherapy and surgery, she could beat it. But her insurance only covered the basics, and the cancer spread very quickly. Now it's in her liver too. The doctors said she has maybe 2 or 3 weeks." 2 or 3 weeks. Marcus closed his eyes. Sarah was dying. The only woman he had truly loved, before Catherine, before he became the cold, calculating man he was today, was dying in a miserable apartment in East Los Angeles, while he lived in a $45 million mansion. "Why did your mother never look for me before?" he asked, the question coming out before he could contain it. "Why wait until now?" Emily looked at him with those huge, sad eyes. "She said you had your own life, that you had become an important person, that she didn't want to be a burden. She has a lot of pride, you know." The girl bit her lip. "But last night she was in a lot of pain, and she started talking in her sleep, saying your name, saying you were a good man, even if you never believed it, and that if something happened to her that I should. Emily couldn't finish the sentence. She bent over herself, sobbing uncontrollably, her small body shaking with the force of her pain. And then Marcus Whitmore, the man who had sworn never to be vulnerable again, who had built impenetrable walls around his heart, who hadn't cried since he was 8 years old, felt something breaking inside him. He knelt in front of the girl and, for the first time in decades, did something completely irrational. He hugged her. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice choked. "I'm going to help. I promise. We're going to bring your mother here right now." Emily lifted her face, her eyes shining with hope for the first time. "Really? You're going to save my mother?" Marcus didn't know if he could. He didn't know if it was already too late. But looking into those eyes full of hope, he knew he had to try. "Let's go," he said, standing up and grabbing the keys to his Bentley. "Take me to her." What Marcus didn't know was that the truth he was about to discover would change not only that night, but the rest of his life. Forever. The drive from Beverly Hills to Boyle Heights took only 25 minutes in Marcus's Bentley Continental, but it felt like an eternity. Emily was sitting on the heated leather seat, still wrapped in the towel, looking out the window as they descended from the luxurious hills to the humbler streets of East Los Angeles. Marcus drove in silence, his fingers gripping the steering wheel tightly. 1,000 thoughts crossed his mind. Sarah, the woman he had known when he was only 22 years old, when he was still a poor student who shared a tiny apartment with 3 college roommates. She worked as a waitress at the cafe where he spent his nights studying, drinking cheap coffee and trying to survive on scholarships and the few dollars he earned doing freelance design work. Sarah had been light in his dark life. She laughed at his bad jokes, sat with him during her breaks, brought him cookies when she noticed he didn't have money to eat. She had seen something in him that no one else saw, not the cold, distant man he had become, but the broken boy who still fought against the wounds of an abandoned childhood. They had fallen in love. Fast and intense. For 6 months, Marcus had believed that maybe he could have something good in his life. That maybe he could trust. That maybe he could love. And then his first company started to take off. Investors began to appear. Meetings, contracts, travel. Marcus was consumed by the ambition to never be poor again, never be vulnerable again. And Sarah became a reminder of the weak man he was trying to leave behind. So he simply disappeared. Changed his number, moved apartments, avoided the cafe where she worked. Cowardly. Pathetic. But effective. He never looked back. Until now. It's there. Emily's voice pulled him from his thoughts. The blue building with the broken fire escape. Marcus parked the Bentley in front of a deteriorated apartment complex. The faded blue paint was peeling, the windows had rusty bars, and the smell of accumulated garbage invaded the car as soon as he turned off the engine. Graffiti covered the walls, and some windows were covered with cardboard instead of glass. This was the world where Sarah had raised her daughter. While he slept on $1,000 sheets. Emily got out of the car quickly, guiding him to the building entrance. The door was broken, swinging on one hinge. The interior hallway smelled of mold and something else, sickness, despair, defeat. Marcus felt his stomach turn, not from the dirt, but from the guilt that crushed him with each step. Apartment 3B, Emily said, climbing the narrow stairs. Marcus followed her, his breathing becoming heavy, not from physical exertion, but from the anticipation of what he would find on the other side of that door. Emily took a key from under the worn doormat and opened the door. The apartment was tiny, a combined living room/kitchen, a small bathroom visible through a half-open door, and a bedroom from where a dim light came. "Mom," Emily called softly, running to the bedroom. "Mom, I brought help." Marcus followed her slowly, his heart beating so hard he could hear it in his ears. And then he saw her. Sarah. She was lying in a narrow bed, so thin that her body barely made a bulge under the thin blanket. Her blonde hair, which he remembered as being luminous and full of life, was now thin and dull, spread on the pillow. Her face was pale, hollow, the bones prominent under translucent skin. There was an improvised four-stand next to the bed, tubes connected to her arm. But when her eyes opened and met his, Marcus saw they were still the same soft blue eyes that had made him believe in goodness so many years ago. "Marcus." Her voice came out as a fragile whisper, incredulous. You're really here? Or am I dreaming again?" Marcus felt his legs weaken. He approached the bed slowly, as if he were approaching something sacred that could disappear if he moved too fast. "It's me," he said, his voice breaking. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Tears began running down her face. "Emily, you went to him?" I told you not to. She tried to sit up, but had no strength. A violent cough shook her fragile body, and Marcus saw blood staining the tissue she brought to her mouth. Mom, please don't be mad, Emily begged, kneeling beside the bed and holding her mother's hand. I heard you talking about him. I saw the photo. I knew he could help. Photo? Marcus asked. Sarah closed her eyes, embarrassed. I kept a photo of us, from the cafe. I know it's pathetic, but... She coughed again. You left, Marcus. You just disappeared. I looked for you, but it was like you had been erased from the world. I'm sorry, Marcus repeated, feeling completely inadequate. What words could fix what he had done? Sarah, I was a coward. I was selfish. I was afraid of feeling something real. But that doesn't matter now. You need treatment. You need the best doctors. I'll take care of everything. I'll transfer you to Cedars-Sinai right now. They have the best oncologists in the country. Experimental treatments, everything. Sarah shook her head weakly. It's too late, Marcus. The cancer, it's everywhere. Lungs, liver, bones. The doctors were clear. There's nothing more to do. I only have, maybe a few weeks. No, Marcus said firmly, surprising himself with the intensity in his voice. I won't accept that. We'll fight. There's still time. There's still hope. Sarah looked at him for a long moment, her eyes filled with something he couldn't identify. Sadness? Remorse? Fear? Marcus, she said slowly, her voice trembling. There's something you need to know. Something I should have told you a long time ago, but I was afraid, ashamed, and then you disappeared and I thought it would be better that way. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? Sarah looked at Emily, who was sitting beside the bed, holding her hand. Then she looked back at Marcus, tears flowing freely now. Emily isn't 7 years old, she whispered. She's 8. She'll be 9 in February. Marcus frowned, confused. I don't understand. She was born in February 2015, Sarah continued, her voice breaking. 9 months after you left. Marcus, Emily isn't just a child I'm asking you to help. The world stopped. She's your daughter. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stood completely still, as if he had been turned to stone. His eyes turned to Emily, who looked confused from her mother to him, not fully understanding what had just been revealed. W.H. What? Marcus finally managed to say, his voice coming out strangled. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after you disappeared, Sarah continued, each word seeming to cost her precious energy she didn't have. I tried to find you, Marcus. I swear I tried. I went to your apartment, but you had moved. Your number didn't work anymore. Your roommates said you had left, that you were focusing on your new company. I had no way to reach you. Marcus felt as if the ground was crumbling beneath his feet. He looked at Emily, really looked at her for the first time. The brown eyes he had thought were Sarah's were actually exactly like his. The shape of her face, the curve of her nose, even the way she bit her lip when she was nervous, they were all his. How had he not seen this before? Why didn't you keep looking? He asked, his voice coming out harsher than he intended, an automatic defense against the avalanche of emotions that threatened to destroy him. You could have gone to the newspapers, the media. My name started appearing in the news a few months later. You could have destroyed your life. Sarah interrupted, her voice weak but firm. Could have ruined your reputation, your company, everything you were building? Marcus, I knew you. I knew you were running from something, from some deep pain you never fully told me about. When you disappeared, I understood that you didn't want that. You didn't want commitment. You didn't want love. She coughed again, and this time the blood was more abundant. Marcus immediately grabbed a glass of water from the nightstand and brought it to her lips. So I decided to raise Emily alone, Sarah continued after taking a sip. I worked 2 jobs during the pregnancy. After she was born, I took extra shifts, worked night shifts. It wasn't easy, but we made it. Emily she's the best thing that ever happened to me. She smiled weakly at her daughter, stroking her hair. She's smart, kind, brave. She's everything I could ever hope for. Emily was beginning to understand. Her eyes widened as she looked from her mother to Marcus. He's my father. Her voice was small, scared, full of a mixture of hope and fear. Marcus knelt beside the bed, getting at eye level with the girl. His daughter. For 8 years he had a daughter and didn't know. Yes, he said, his voice choked. I am. Emily, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. If I had known. He stopped. What would he have done? Would he have stayed? Would he have abandoned his career? Or would he have been even more cowardly and offered money to make the problem disappear? He didn't know. And that uncertainty destroyed him inside. Emily studied him in silence for a long moment. Then, to his surprise, she extended her hand and touched his face gently. You have the same eyes as me, she whispered. Mom always said my eyes were special, that they came from someone strong. Marcus felt tears burning in his eyes, tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed for decades. Emily, But before he could finish, Sarah was seized by another coughing fit, this one more violent than the previous ones. Her entire body contorted, and she bent over herself, struggling to breathe. The tissue became completely red with blood. Mom! Emily screamed, panic in her voice. Marcus immediately grabbed his cell phone. I'm calling an ambulance. We're taking her to the hospital now. No, Sarah managed to say between coughs. There's no time, and I can't pay. I don't care about money. Marcus exploded, his voice echoing in the small apartment. Sarah, you're dying. Do you think I care how much it will cost? I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Let me do this. Let me at least try to fix a fraction of what I destroyed. He dialed 911, requesting an urgent ambulance. While talking to the operator, his eyes kept returning to Emily, who held her mother's hand, tears silently streaming down her face. His daughter. He had a daughter. And her mother was dying. After hanging up, Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, taking Sarah's other hand. It was so cold, so fragile. How had someone so full of life become so close to death? Sarah, why now? He asked softly. Why did you look for me now? Sarah looked at Emily, her eyes filled with love and infinite sadness. Because I'm dying, Marcus. And Emily, she has no one else. My parents died in a car accident when she was 3. I have no siblings. There's no family. When I die. Her voice broke. When I die, she'll go into the foster care system. And I can't let that happen. Not to her. Not after everything we've been through together. Marcus felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. The foster care system. The same system that had destroyed his own childhood. The same system that had turned him into the cold, broken man he was today. "No," he said with absolute firmness. "That's not going to happen. Emily isn't going to any orphanage, any foster home. She's going to stay with me." Emily lifted her eyes to him, surprised. "Really? Really?" Marcus confirmed, looking into his daughter's eyes. "I haven't been a father to you until now. I didn't even know you existed. But that's going to change. I promise, Emily. I'm going to learn. I'm going to be the father you deserve." Sarah began crying silently, a mixture of relief and sadness on her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, Marcus. That's all I needed to hear." Sirens sounded from outside. The ambulance had arrived. Paramedics stormed into the small apartment moments later, moving with practiced efficiency. They assessed Sarah quickly, exchanging worried looks that Marcus immediately recognized. She was much worse than they expected. "We're taking her to County General," one of the paramedics said. "No," Marcus interrupted with authority. "Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Call them. Tell them Marcus Whitmore is sending a priority patient. They'll know what to do." The paramedic blinked, surprised, but grabbed his radio immediately. The name Marcus Whitmore opened doors, even in medical emergencies. As they placed Sarah on a stretcher, Emily grabbed Marcus's hand tightly. "Will she be okay?" she asked, her voice small and scared. "Can you save her?" Marcus looked at his daughter, desperately wanting to promise yes, that everything would be okay. But he couldn't lie to her. "Not about this. I'm going to do everything in my power," he said. "I promise." It was the only promise he could make. And he prayed it would be enough. Cedars-Sinai Medical Center was a fortress of glass and steel that rose majestically in Beverly Hills, one of the most prestigious hospitals in the United States. When the ambulance arrived at 2 in the morning, a complete team was already waiting at the emergency entrance. The power of Marcus Whitmore's name had ensured that Sarah would receive the best medical care available on the planet. Marcus and Emily followed behind the stretcher as Sarah was quickly taken to the intensive care unit. Emily didn't let go of Marcus's hand for a single second, her small fingers clutching his with desperate strength. He could feel the trembling in her body, part fear, part exhaustion, part shock from everything that had happened on that impossible night. "Mr. Whitmore," a gray-haired doctor with glasses approached him in the hallway. Her ID said, "Dr. Jennifer Chen, Chief of Oncology." "I'm Dr. Chen. I've already reviewed the limited medical records we managed to get from Ms. Parker. I need to be frank with you. The situation is extremely serious." Marcus nodded, trying to maintain composure. "Tell me everything. Don't hide anything." Dr. Chen looked at Emily, hesitant. Marcus understood immediately. "Emily," he knelt in front of the girl. "You must be exhausted. How about if a nurse takes you to a comfortable room where you can rest a bit? I'm going to talk to the doctor and then I'll come get you. Your mother is in good hands now, I promise." Emily bit her lip, clearly torn between overwhelming exhaustion and fear of leaving her mother. "You'll tell me everything later? You won't treat me like a child and hide things." Marcus was impressed with her maturity. This girl, his daughter, had grown up too fast, forced by circumstance to be an adult before her time. Exactly like he had been. "I'll tell you the truth," he promised. "Always. You deserve that." Emily nodded slowly and allowed a nurse to take her away. Marcus waited until she disappeared down the hallway before turning to Dr. Chen. "Now tell me," he said, his voice tense. "How much time does she have?" Dr. Chin sighed deeply. MS. Parker's pancreatic cancer is advanced stage 4 with extensive metastases. It's in her lungs, liver, and a preliminary CT scan we did suggests it has also reached her bones. She has severe jaundice, indicating imminent liver failure, and her CA19-9 levels are astronomically high. In plain English, Doctor, she's dying, Mr. Whitmore, and there's not much we can do to prevent it. Realistically speaking, days. Maybe a week, at most 2 if we're lucky. Marcus felt his legs weaken. He leaned against the wall. What about experimental treatment? Immunotherapy. There's a treatment in Switzerland, in Japan. Anything. Money is no object. I can pay whatever is necessary. Dr. Chin placed a gentle hand on his arm. Mr. Whitmore, I understand your desperation. Believe me, if there were any treatment that could help her, I would be recommending it right now. But she's far beyond that. Her body is shutting down. Any aggressive treatment at this point would only cause more suffering with no real chance of recovery. So what do we do? Marcus asked, his voice breaking. Just let her die. We focus on keeping her comfortable, Dr. Chin said softly. We control the pain, ensure that she can spend the time she has left with dignity, surrounded by those she loves. And she paused. Mr. Whitmore, there's something else you need to know. Marcus lifted his eyes to her. MS. Parker was conscious when we arrived. She told me something before being sedated. She said she spent the last 8 years working double and triple shifts, skipping meals, ignoring her own health to ensure her daughter had food, clothes, education. She said she started feeling symptoms more than a year ago, but didn't seek treatment because she didn't have adequate insurance and couldn't afford to lose work time. Marcus felt guilt crush him like an avalanche. You're saying that if she had sought help earlier? Maybe. Pancreatic cancer is aggressive, but if detected early, there's a chance. A small chance, but a chance. Dr. Chin stared at him directly. She sacrificed her own life for her daughter, Mr. Whitmore. And now she's asking us to ensure Emily is okay after she's gone. Marcus couldn't hold back anymore. The tears he had suppressed his entire life began to fall, silent but unstoppable. He covered his face with his hands, his entire body shaking with sobs he didn't know he was capable of feeling. Sarah had sacrificed everything. And why? Because he had been a coward. Because he had run away. Because he had chosen money and power over love and connection. Can I see her? He finally asked, wiping his face with the back of his hand. Yes. She's awake now, though quite sedated for the pain. Room 412. Marcus walked down the hallway in a trance. Each step seemed to weigh a ton. When he reached the door to room 412, he stopped, taking a deep breath before entering. Sarah was lying in the hospital bed, surrounded by monitors and tubes. She looked even smaller, even more fragile than in the apartment. But when her eyes met his, she smiled weakly. You came, she whispered. Of course I came, Marcus said, pulling a chair to the side of the bed. Sarah, No, she interrupted softly. There's no time for apologies, Marcus. There's no time for what-ifs. There's only time for what matters now. Emily, Marcus said. Emily, Sarah agreed. Marcus, I know this is unfair. Throwing an 8-year-old child into your life like this, without warning. I know you didn't ask for this. But she's special. She's smart and kind and strong. She deserves a chance. A chance I can no longer give her. Marcus held Sarah's hand, so small and cold in his. I'll take care of her. I promise. She'll never suffer what I suffered. She'll never feel abandoned or alone. I'll learn to be the father she deserves, even if I have no idea how. Sarah smiled, tears running down her face. You already are. The simple fact that you're here, that you've promised this, it's more than I could ever hope for. Why did you keep my photo? Marcus suddenly asked. After everything I did, why did you keep it? Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Because despite everything, Marcus Whitmore, you were a good man. You were just scared. And I always believed that one day, when you were ready, you would remember you had a heart. And I was right. She coughed, and Marcus saw blood staining the tissue again. Time was running out. He could feel it in the air, like an inevitable presence hovering over them. There's one thing I need to ask you, Sarah said when the cough passed. In the bottom drawer of my nightstand, in the apartment, there's a blue shoebox. Inside it are letters. Letters I wrote to Emily over the years, for her to read when I'm no longer here. There are also photos of us, certificates, important documents. And... She paused. And there are letters I wrote to you. Letters I never sent. Promise you'll get that box. I promise, Marcus said. And Marcus. Sarah squeezed his hand with surprising strength. Don't let my death be in vain. Don't go back to being the man who runs away. Emily needs you. And I think you need her too. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. And there, in that hospital room at 3 a.m, Marcus Whitmore began to understand that his life was about to change in ways his money could never buy or control. Marcus left Sarah's room with a heavy heart. He walked through the sterile hospital hallway, his footsteps echoing in the early morning silence. The nurse who had taken Emily guided him to a small waiting room reserved for family members, where he found his daughter wrapped in a blanket, sleeping on a couch. But as soon as he entered, Emily immediately opened her eyes, as if her body had only been resting, but her mind remained alert, waiting for news. How is she? Emily asked, sitting up quickly. Marcus sat beside her on the couch, maintaining a respectful space between them. He had promised honesty, and he wouldn't go back on that now. She's very sick, Emily, he said softly. The doctors are doing everything they can to keep her comfortable, but... He stopped, struggling to find the right words. How do you tell an 8-year-old child that her mother is dying? She's going to die, isn't she? Emily said, her voice surprisingly calm. I already knew. She tried to hide it from me, but I heard her crying at night. I saw the blood on the tissues she hid in the trash. I knew. Marcus was simultaneously impressed and destroyed by this child's forced maturity. Yes, he said simply. She is. And I'm sorry, Emily. I'm sorry you have to go through this. I'm sorry I wasn't there before. Emily was silent for a long moment, looking at her own hands. Then, suddenly, she asked, Why did you leave? My mother never told me. She always said good things about you, that you were smart and hardworking and had big dreams. But she never told me why you left. Marcus felt the question like a knife to the heart. I was afraid, he admitted, more honest than he had been with anyone in decades. When I was a child, I was like you, an orphan. My parents died when I was 8 years old, exactly your age. And the foster care system wasn't kind to me. Emily looked at him with new eyes, surprised. You also lost your parents? Yes. And I spent 10 years being passed from home to home, never belonging anywhere, never being truly wanted. When I finally left at 18, I promised myself I would never be vulnerable again. That I would never let anyone close enough to hurt me. Marcus looked at her. And then I met your mother. And she was pure light. She made me feel things I had sworn never to feel again. And that terrified me. So you ran away, Emily completed. Yes. I ran away. And it was the most cowardly and stupid decision of my life. Marcus took a deep breath. Emily, I can't change the past. I can't get back the 8 years I lost with you. But I can promise you the future. Your mother asked me to take care of you, and I will. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because you deserve to have a father. And because I think I need you as much as you need me. Emily tilted her head, studying him. Are you afraid of me too? The question caught him off guard. Afraid of you? You said you're afraid of letting people close. Are you afraid I'll hurt you too? Marcus was astonished by her perception. Yes, he admitted. I am. But I'm willing to try anyway. Emily was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, she moved across the couch and approached him, placing her head on his shoulder. Marcus froze, not knowing what to do. He wasn't used to physical affection. He wasn't used to closeness. But then, slowly, he put his arm around her, pulling her closer. And there, on that hospital couch at 4 a.m, Marcus Whitmore hugged his daughter for the first time. My mother always said God has a plan, Emily murmured against his chest. She said that sometimes bad things happen, but there's always a reason. She said I was a blessing that came from her sadness. Maybe you and I finding each other like this is also part of some plan. Marcus wasn't a religious man. He had stopped believing in God the day his parents died. But in that moment, holding that girl, his daughter, he desperately wanted to believe there was something bigger, something with purpose behind all that pain. Maybe, he whispered. They remained like that for several minutes, in comfortable silence, until Emily spoke again. Can I ask you a question? Any question. Where will I live? After Mom. She couldn't finish the sentence. With me, Marcus answered immediately. In my house. I know it's big and probably scary, but we'll turn it into a home. Together. You can have whatever room you want, decorate it however you like. We'll figure out which schools are good, make friends, find hobbies you enjoy. I have no idea what I'm doing, Emily. I've never been a father before. But I'll learn. I promise I'll learn. Emily lifted her head and looked him in the eyes. Can you take me to see Mom again? Of course. Let's go now, if you want. They returned to room 412 hand in hand. Sarah was awake, fighting against the sleep induced by pain medications. When she saw Emily and Marcus together, her face lit up with a weak but genuine smile. You two look good together, she said, her voice weak. Emily carefully climbed onto the bed beside her mother, nestling against her as she probably did every night. Marcus stood beside them, feeling simultaneously part of that moment and separate from it. Marcus told me about when he was a child, Emily said to her mother. He also lost his parents. Like I'm going to lose you. Sarah stroked Emily's hair gently. But you won't be alone, my love. You have your father now. And he'll take care of you. I know he will. I know, Emily said. I trust him. Those 4 words, I trust him, coming from a child he had just met, hit Marcus with more force than any $1 million deal ever had. Emily barely knew him, but she was willing to place her trust in him. To trust that he wouldn't abandon her like he had abandoned her mother. He couldn't disappoint her. Not this time. Sarah, Marcus said suddenly. There's something I need to do. I'm going to your apartment to get the box you mentioned. And when I come back. He hesitated. I want to do this right. I want to legally adopt Emily. I want my name on her birth certificate. I want her to be officially my daughter under the law. Sarah began crying silently, tears of relief streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, Marcus. Don't thank me yet, he said. I'll probably mess up 1,000 times. I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to do any of this. Sarah extended her hand, and he took it. Nobody knows, she said. We learn. And Marcus, you're not alone in learning anymore. You have Emily now, and she'll teach you as much as you'll teach her. Marcus looked at his daughter, who looked at him with those brown eyes identical to his, filled with hope and trust he didn't deserve but was determined to honor. Then we'll learn together, he said. And for the first time in his adult life, Marcus Whitmore wasn't running from a connection. He was running toward it. Marcus left the hospital at 5 in the morning, when the sky was beginning to lighten over Los Angeles. Emily had finally fallen asleep beside Sarah, and he didn't want to disturb them. Dr. Chen had assured him that both would be fine until he returned. The drive back to Boyle Heights felt different this time. The streets that had seemed threatening the night before now simply looked tired, deteriorated buildings where hard-working people struggled to survive. As Sarah had struggled. As his daughter had grown up. He parked the Bentley in front of the faded blue building and climbed the stairs to apartment 3B. The door was still unlocked from when the paramedics had left hastily hours before. Marcus entered slowly, seeing the space with new eyes in the dim morning light. The apartment was tiny, but it was clean and organized. The walls had Emily's drawings taped up, drawings of flowers, rainbows, and a house with a woman and a girl holding hands. There was no man in the drawings. Because he was never there. In the small living room, there was an improvised bookshelf made of wooden crates, filled with library books. Children's books, but also books about science, math, history. Sarah was ensuring Emily had an education, even without financial means. There was a small whiteboard on the wall with English words and their meanings. Sarah was teaching her daughter advanced vocabulary. Marcus entered the bedroom where he had found Sarah the night before. The bed was still unmade, the sheets stained with blood where she had coughed. He approached the old nightstand beside the bed and opened the bottom drawer. There it was. A faded blue shoebox, with the words, "For Emily, with all my love," written on the lid in Sarah's careful handwriting. Marcus sat on the bed and opened the box with trembling hands. The first thing he saw was the photo. It wasn't just any photo. It was the photo of him and Sarah, taken at the cafe where she worked, so many years ago. He was smiling, really smiling, something he rarely did anymore. Sarah was leaning against him, radiant, her eyes shining with happiness. They looked so young, so hopeful, so completely oblivious to what the future would bring. Under the photo were stacks of letters, each in an envelope carefully labeled with dates. He picked up the first one. For Emily, to read when you turn 13. For Emily, to read when you graduate high school. For Emily, to read on your wedding day. For Emily, to read when you become a mother. Sarah had written letters for every important milestone in Emily's life, moments she knew she wouldn't live to see. Marcus felt tears burning in his eyes as he held those envelopes, each one a ghost of the future Sarah was being forced to give up. At the bottom of the box, there were different envelopes. Envelopes addressed to him. With trembling hands, Marcus picked up the first one, dated June 2015. Dear Marcus, today I found out I'm pregnant. It's 3 weeks, and the doctor says everything is fine. I tried to find you. I looked everywhere. But you disappeared completely, as if you had never existed. I'm scared. I'm alone. But I'm also happy? It's strange. I'm carrying a part of you inside me. A part of the man I loved. And even though you're gone, even though I may never see you again, I'm going to love this baby with everything I have. I don't hate you, Marcus. I understand why you ran. I saw the pain in your eyes whenever you talked about your past. You were afraid to get attached. And I was naive enough to think my love would be enough to heal your wounds. But it wasn't. And that's okay. I'll raise this baby alone. And I'll tell her about you. About the good man you were, underneath all that fear. With love, still, Sarah. Marcus couldn't stop crying. He moved to the next letter, dated February 2016. Dear Marcus, Emily was born today. Emily Rose Parker. Rose was my mother's name. Parker is my last name because you're not here to give yours. She has your eyes, Marcus. Deep brown eyes that seem to see through people. She's perfect. Small, but strong. She cried loudly when she was born, as if announcing her presence to the world. When I held her for the first time, I knew I would do anything for her. Anything. And I also knew I couldn't look for you again. Because if I showed up in your life with a baby, you would have 2 choices, reject her or accept her out of obligation. And she deserves more than that. She deserves to be loved unconditionally, not to be seen as a mistake or a burden. So I'll raise her alone. And I'll love her for both of us. Sarah. Marcus went through the stack of letters, reading fragments of Emily's life that he had missed. A letter about Emily's first day of school, where she cried because she was afraid of leaving Sarah alone. A letter about when Emily learned to read and started devouring books, exactly like Marcus did as a child. A letter about when Emily asked for the first time about her father, and Sarah didn't know what to say except, he was a good man who was fighting his own battles. A letter about when Sarah discovered the cancer and cried all night, not for herself, but for Emily. And then, the last letter. Dated 3 days ago. Dear Marcus, I'm dying. The doctor was clear, days, maybe weeks. And I'm so afraid. Not of dying, but of leaving Emily. She's everything to me. My reason for living. And soon she'll be alone. I've kept your address all these years. I've read about you in the news. I've seen your photo in business magazines. You became exactly what you always wanted to be. Rich, powerful, respected. I was happy for you, Marcus. Genuinely happy. But now I'm desperate. Emily needs someone. And you're the only family she has. I know I don't have the right to ask this. I know it's unfair to show up now, after 8 years, and throw a child into your life. But Marcus, if there's any part of the man I knew still living inside you, the man who dreamed of making a difference, the man who stayed up all night studying not for money, but because he genuinely wanted to learn, the man who made me believe in goodness. Please, don't let my daughter go into the system. Please, give her the family neither of us ever had. With eternal hope, Sarah. Marcus carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. He looked around the small apartment where his daughter had grown up, where Sarah had sacrificed everything, where love had flourished despite poverty. He picked up the blue box, locked the apartment, and went down the stairs. But before getting in the car, he looked up at the sky, which was now completely clear, painted in shades of orange and pink by the sunrise. I promise, he said out loud, speaking to Sarah, to God, to the universe, or perhaps just to himself. I'm going to be the man you believed I could be. I'll take care of her. I'll love her. And she will never, never feel alone. A gentle breeze blew, carrying with it the leaves from the solitary tree growing on the cracked sidewalk. And Marcus Whitmore, for the first time since he was 8 years old, felt something he had forgotten was possible to feel: hope. The next 5 days were the most intense of Marcus Whitmore's life. He canceled all meetings, delegated important decisions to his executive team, and practically moved into Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. His life, which once revolved around financial charts and million-dollar negotiations, now revolved around a dying woman and an 8-year-old girl he barely knew, but who was his daughter. Emily didn't leave Sarah's side. Marcus brought clean clothes from the apartment, toys, books, everything that could make those final days more comfortable. He installed Emily in one of the VIP rooms adjacent to Sarah's, ensuring she could be near her mother at any time. And somewhere between changing sheets, reading bedtime stories, and wiping away tears, Marcus began to learn what it meant to be a father. On the second night, Emily couldn't sleep. She appeared at the door of the room where Marcus was resting in an uncomfortable armchair, holding a worn teddy bear. "I can't stop thinking," she said, her voice small in the darkness. Marcus got up immediately. "Want to talk about it?" Emily nodded, and they went out to the hospital garden, a small green space on the roof where patients and families could get fresh air. It was almost midnight, and they were alone under the stars that were rarely visible in Los Angeles's polluted sky. "What's going to happen when Mom dies?" Emily asked, sitting on a bench. Marcus sat beside her, choosing his words carefully. "We'll have a beautiful funeral for her. A place where we can always visit her. And then you come live with me. And we start our new life together." "Are you scared?" Emily asked. "Terrified," Marcus admitted honestly. "I don't know how to be a father. I don't know what 8-year-old girls like. I don't know how to do braids or pack lunchboxes or help with third-grade homework." Emily laughed weakly. "I don't know how to do braids either. Mom always did them for me." They were silent for a moment. Then Emily said, "Maybe we can watch YouTube videos together. About braids." Marcus looked at her, surprised. And then he laughed, a genuine laugh that came from deep in his chest. "Yes. Let's do that. Let's watch YouTube videos about braids. And about everything else we don't know." Emily smiled, and Marcus realized it was the first time he'd seen her really smile since he'd met her. "Can I ask you a question?" she said shyly. "Always. Why didn't you ever marry again? After your ex-wife?" Marcus was surprised by the question. "How do you know about that?" "I Googled your name," Emily admitted, embarrassed. "On the computer at the school library. I wanted to know who my father was." Marcus should have anticipated this. Any curious child would do the same. "I didn't marry again because I was too busy building my empire. Too busy making money. Too busy being important." He looked at her. "I thought those things would make me happy. But they don't." "And now?" Emily asked. "Are you happy now?" It was an impossible question. How could he be happy when Sarah was dying? But looking at Emily, at his daughter who had entered his life like a hurricane and turned everything upside down, he realized something surprising. "I think for the first time in a long time," he said slowly, "I have something worth living for. Not just working for. Not just accumulating. But really living for." Emily moved closer to him on the bench and rested her head on his shoulder. Marcus pulled her closer, and they stayed like that for a long time, looking at the stars. On the third day, Sarah had a momentary improvement, a common phenomenon in terminal patients that Dr. Chen called the final awakening. She was more alert, more present than she had been in days. Marcus took the opportunity to bring a lawyer to the hospital. With Sarah conscious and witnesses present, they signed emergency adoption documents, ensuring Marcus would be Emily's legal guardian. Sarah also signed her will, leaving everything she had, which wasn't much, just some savings and personal belongings, to Emily. "There's one more thing," Sarah said after the lawyer left. She looked at Marcus and Emily, who were sitting together beside her bed. "I want you to take a photo. The three of us together. It's important to me." A nurse kindly took the photo with Marcus's phone. Sarah in the center of the bed, thin and pale but smiling. Emily beside her, holding her hand. And Marcus on the other side, with his hand on Emily's shoulder. A family. Strange, broken, and formed at the last possible moment. But a family. "Perfect," Sarah whispered, looking at the photo. "Absolutely perfect." On the fourth day, Marcus took Emily to see the mansion. She needed to see where she would live, prepare for the change that would come soon. Emily was speechless when the gates opened. "Is this a house or a museum?" "It's too big," Marcus admitted. "I never knew what to do with so much space. But now we have a reason to fill it." He took her through the rooms, letting her choose which one she wanted. Emily chose one on the second floor with large windows overlooking the garden. "Can I have a dog?" she asked hopefully. "Yes," Marcus answered immediately, surprising himself. He had never liked pets. Too much work, too messy. But seeing the hope on Emily's face, he knew he would bring a dozen dogs if that's what she wanted. "And can I paint the walls?" she asked. "Purple." Marcus looked at the immaculate white walls that had cost a fortune to install. "Any color you want." Emily hugged him so tight that Marcus felt something breaking inside him, not from pain, but from something deeper. Love. Not the calculated love he had felt for Catherine, but something pure and unconditional that he didn't know he was capable of feeling. On the fifth day, Sarah began to deteriorate again. Her body was giving up. Dr. Chen increased the sedatives to control the pain, and Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness. During one of her lucid moments, she asked to speak with Marcus alone. Emily left reluctantly, and Marcus sat beside Sarah, holding her cold hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything. For taking care of her. For becoming the man I always knew you could be." "Sarah, Shoo," she interrupted him. "There's no time. Just promise me one last thing." "Anything. Don't let my death close you off again," Sarah said, her blue eyes fixed on his. "Don't build those walls again. Emily needs you. The real you. The man with a heart, not the man with a bank account." "I promise," Marcus said, tears streaming down his face. Sarah smiled weakly. "And Marcus, when she grows up and asks about me, tell her I loved her more than anything, that every sacrifice was worth it, and that my only regret was not having enough time." "I will," Marcus promised. Sarah closed her eyes, exhausted. "Send Emily in. I want to hold my girl one last time." Marcus called Emily, and she ran into her mother's arms. Sarah hugged her with all the strength she had left. "I love you, my angel," she whispered. "I always loved you. I always will love you." "I love you too, Mom," Emily sobbed. And there, in that hospital room, as the sun set over Los Angeles, a shattered family said goodbye. Sarah Elizabeth Parker passed away at 3:47 in the morning on the sixth day, with her daughter sleeping in her arms and Marcus sitting beside the bed, holding her hand. There was no dramatic final struggle. There were no farewell words loaded with wisdom. She simply took a deep breath one last time, a small smile touching her lips, and then, peace. The monitor emitted a sharp, continuous sound. Nurses entered quickly but respectfully, checking vital signs that no longer existed. Dr. Chen appeared moments later, placing her hand gently on Marcus's shoulder. "She's gone," she said softly. "I'm sorry." Emily woke with the noise, disoriented for a moment. Then she saw her mother's face, so peaceful, so quiet, and she knew. "Mom." Her voice came out small, scared. "Mom, wake up. Please, wake up." Marcus pulled her into his arms, holding her as she screamed, sobbed, fought against the cruel reality that couldn't be changed. He held her tight, letting her release all the pain, all the anger, all the agony of losing the most important person in her life. "I'm here," he whispered repeatedly. "I'm here, Emily. You're not alone. I promise, you'll never be alone." They stayed like that for hours. The nurses cleaned and prepared Sarah's body with respect, allowing Marcus and Emily to say goodbye properly. Marcus kissed Sarah's forehead one last time, whispering, "Thank you," for Emily, for giving him a second chance, for believing in him when he didn't believe in himself. Emily placed her head on her mother's chest, listening to the silence where there had once been heartbeats. "I'll miss you forever," she whispered. "But I'll make you proud. I promise." The funeral took place 4 days later in a quiet cemetery in Glendale, overlooking the hills. Marcus spared no expense, not for show, but because Sarah deserved to be honored properly. The casket was polished mahogany, covered with white roses, Sarah's favorites, according to Emily. There were surprisingly many people present. Co-workers from the hospital where Sarah had been a nurse. Neighbors from the building in Boyle Heights. Emily's teachers. People whose lives Sarah had touched with her quiet kindness. Marcus had hired a pastor to conduct the service, but when it was time to speak about Sarah, he stood up. "I didn't know Sarah for very long," he began, his voice echoing through the silent chapel. "Only 6 months, many years ago. But in those 6 months, she showed me what it meant to be truly good. Generous not with money, but with heart. Courageous not in battles, but in choosing to love even when it's difficult." He looked at Emily, who was sitting in the front row between Dr. Chen and a nurse who had become close to them during those final days. Sarah raised an extraordinary daughter alone, worked herself to exhaustion, sacrificed her health, her youth, her dreams. And why? For love. Pure, unconditional love that asked for nothing in return. Marcus felt his voice break, but continued. "She gave me the greatest blessing of my life, my daughter, Emily. And for that, I will be eternally grateful." He stepped down from the pulpit and sat beside Emily, who held his hand tightly. When it was time to lower the casket, Emily asked to throw the first rose. "Until we meet again, Mom," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. "I love you." Marcus watched as each person present threw a flower, each one a small tribute to a woman who had lived quietly but impacted deeply. That night, back at the mansion, Emily was exceptionally quiet. Marcus found her sitting on the floor of her new room, still undecorated, still just white walls and cardboard boxes full of her things from the apartment, looking at the blue box Sarah had left. "Can I sit with you?" Marcus asked. Emily nodded yes, and he sat beside her on the floor, their backs against the wall. "I keep waiting to wake up," Emily said softly. "Waiting for all this to be a nightmare. That I'll wake up in our apartment and Mom will be there, making burnt pancakes like she always did on Sundays." "I know," Marcus said. When my parents died, it took me years to really believe they were gone. I still dreamed about them. Still expected them to appear at the door. Does the pain go away? Emily asked, turning to look at him. Marcus chose his words carefully. No, he said honestly. It doesn't go away. But it changes. It transforms into something different. Into memories. Into love that remains even when the person is gone. Into lessons they taught us. Your mother will always be part of you, Emily. Every good choice you make, every moment of kindness, every time you choose love instead of fear, she'll be there. Emily was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I'm afraid. Of what? Of forgetting her. The sound of her voice. The way she smelled. The way she laughed. Tears began to fall. What if I forget? Marcus pulled her into a hug. You won't forget. I promise. We'll keep her memory alive. We'll look at photos, read the letters she wrote to you, tell stories about her. And when you're older, you'll tell your own children about the incredible grandmother they never met. Emily nestled against him. Do you really think Mom would be proud of me? Even though I'm moving into this huge house and having everything she could never give me. She wouldn't just be proud, Marcus said firmly. She would be radiant. Because that's exactly what she wanted. For you to have opportunities, for you to be happy, for you to be loved. Honoring her memory doesn't mean living in poverty or refusing good things. It means living fully, loving deeply, and giving to others the way she gave. Emily looked at him with those brown eyes so similar to his. Will you really stay? You won't disappear when things get hard. It was the question Marcus knew would come eventually. The question based on what he had done in the past. Emily, he said, turning to face her completely. I've made many mistakes in my life. The biggest one was running from the people who loved me. But I learned something these past few days. I learned that the money I spent my whole life accumulating means nothing if you don't have anyone to share it with. I learned that success without love is just a pretty word for loneliness. He took both her hands in his. You saved me, Emily. As surely as your mother saved me all those years ago. You gave me a purpose. A reason to be something more than just rich. So no, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to mess things up. I'll make mistakes. I'll probably embarrass you in front of your friends sometimes. But I will never, never abandon you. Emily studied his face for a long moment, searching for any sign of uncertainty. Then, slowly, she nodded. Okay, she said. I believe you. And in that moment, sitting on the floor of an empty room in a $45 million mansion, Marcus Whitmore finally understood what his life had been missing. It wasn't more money. It wasn't more power. It wasn't more recognition. It was this. This girl. This connection. This love that couldn't be bought or negotiated. It was family. 6 months later, the mansion on Mulholland Drive no longer looked like a cold, empty mausoleum. The impeccable white walls of Emily's room were now vibrant purple, covered with posters of her favorite bands, drawings she had made, and photos, lots of photos. Photos of Sarah. Photos of Emily and Marcus. Photos of Golden, the 3-month-old golden retriever who now slept at the foot of Emily's bed every night. Marcus was in the kitchen, the huge gourmet kitchen he had rarely used, trying to make pancakes. They were coming out burnt, exactly as Sarah used to make them. Emily was laughing as she watched him, sitting on the counter eating strawberries. You're doing it wrong, she said between laughs. You have to wait for the bubbles to appear before flipping. I am waiting for the bubbles. Marcus protested, flipping a pancake that was definitely too dark on one side. "Too long, Dad," Emily said, and then stopped abruptly. It was the first time she had called him that. Marcus froze, the spatula in the air. He slowly turned to look at her. "What did you say?" Emily turned red. Sorry. I didn't mean. It's just that at school all the kids talk about their dads and I automatically." "Emily." Marcus put down the spatula and approached her. "You can call me Dad. I would love it if you called me Dad." Emily smiled shyly. "Really?" "Really," Marcus confirmed, pulling her into a hug. "Actually, it's the best thing anyone has ever called me." Golden started barking from the living room, signaling that the mailman had arrived. Emily jumped off the counter to check, and Marcus returned to the pancakes, which were now definitely burnt. The last 6 months had been the most challenging and simultaneously the most rewarding of Marcus's life. He had learned about school schedules, healthy lunchboxes, and how to check for lice, thanks to an outbreak at Emily's school. He had learned about nightmares, about how to do braids, after dozens of YouTube tutorials, and about the importance of reading bedtime stories, even when you were exhausted. He had also learned about parent-teacher conferences, where he discovered that Emily was brilliant at math but struggled with reading because she was distracted worrying about other things. So Marcus hired a gentle tutor, but also began reading with her every night, working together. He had learned about sleepovers, where 5 girls screamed and laughed until 2 in the morning, and he didn't sleep at all, but didn't mind. He had learned about therapy, both for Emily and for himself. A therapist specializing in childhood grief came twice a week, helping Emily process the loss of her mother. And Marcus also began seeing a therapist, working through decades of unresolved trauma from his own childhood. But above all, he had learned about love. Love that had nothing to do with deserving or earning, but simply was. 2 years later, Emily, now 10 years old, was on the school auditorium stage, presenting a science project about solar energy. Marcus was in the audience, filming everything on his phone like any proud father, next to Catherine, his ex-wife, who had reappeared in his life 6 months ago. The divorce had been bitter, but when Catherine learned about Emily, something changed. She had asked to meet her, nervous and hesitant. And to Marcus's surprise, Emily had liked her. Catherine wasn't trying to replace Sarah, no one could, but she had become a positive female presence in Emily's life. An honorary aunt, as Emily called her. After the presentation, they went to celebrate with ice cream. Emily excitedly told them about her project while eating a giant chocolate sundae. "Mom would have loved this," she said suddenly, and there was no sadness in her voice, just fond remembrance. "She always said I should study hard and do something important." "And you are," Marcus said, stealing a spoonful of her ice cream. "She would be incredibly proud." That night, after Emily went to sleep, Marcus went to his office. The same office where he had been that rainy night 2 years ago when a desperate girl knocked on his door. He opened a drawer and took out a framed photo. It was the last photo, Sarah, Emily, and him at the hospital. A family formed at the last possible moment, but a family nonetheless. "Thank you," he whispered to the photo. "For her. For giving me a second chance. For believing I could be more than I was." 5 years later, Emily was 13 now, navigating the turbulent teenage years with the same determination her mother had shown. She had opened the first envelope Sarah had left, "To read when you turn 13, and cried in Marcus's arms as she read her mother's words. But she was also thriving. She was president of the science club, volunteered at a homeless shelter on weekends, insisting she wanted to help people like Marcus had helped her and her mother, and dreamed of becoming a doctor. Marcus had changed too. His company was still successful, but he had created the Sarah Parker Foundation, dedicated to helping single mothers with medical and educational expenses. Millions of dollars that had previously sat idle in bank accounts now transformed lives, just as Sarah had transformed his. He had also started a mentorship program for children in foster care, using his own story to show them that their past didn't define their future. "You became exactly who Mom said you were," Emily told him once. "A good man. You were just hiding for a while." 10 years later, Emily was on stage, holding her high school diploma, valedictorian of her class. Marcus was in the audience crying, without any shame, as his daughter spoke about overcoming, gratitude, and honoring those who loved us. "My mother, Sarah Parker, taught me that love is the only thing that remains when everything else disappears," Emily said, her voice firm and clear. "And my father, Marcus Whitmore, taught me that it's never too late to become who you should be. That family isn't just about blood, but about choice. About showing up. About loving even when it's scary." She looked directly at Marcus in the audience. "Dad, thank you for choosing me. For staying. For becoming my hero." Marcus couldn't stop crying. That rainy night 10 years ago, when he had opened the door to a desperate girl, had changed everything. He had thought he was saving her. But the truth was the opposite. Emily had saved him. Sarah had saved him. Love had saved him. And now, looking at his daughter, brilliant, compassionate, strong, Marcus Whitmore finally understood what it meant to be truly, completely, unchangeably rich. Not in money, but in love. And that was the only treasure that truly mattered. If this story touched your heart, leave a like on the video. Tell me in the comments, which part moved you the most? Was it when Marcus discovered about Emily? When Sarah said goodbye? Or when Emily finally called him Dad? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more moving stories like this one. We have dozens of inspiring stories waiting for you. And if you need a dose of hope today, go to our playlist and binge other stories that will restore your faith in human goodness. This was the story of Marcus and Emily. A story about second chances, about love that transforms, and about how it's never too late to be who you should be. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for watching. Until the next story.